for truth.
Welcome to Duality Check, the podcast where two brothers embark on a journey through the realms of scientific inquiry, the mysteries of the past, and the uncharted frontiers of spirituality. Join us as we explore the wonders of our world and beyond, all while embracing the roles of curious bystanders rather than experts. Together we'll unravel the tapestry of existence, blending the dichotomies of knowledge and wonder. Get ready to question, ponder, and delve into the dualities that shape our understanding of reality on Duality Check. I'm Drew.
And I'm Dean, and welcome to episode number 51.
5-1.
We're going to do another episode on the Ancient Apocalypse series.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Graham.
I finally did all my show prep for episode 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we've got some other stuff to get out of the way. Did you see that this week Bitcoin went over $100,000?
No.
You didn't see that?
I didn't. I wasn't looking this week much.
Yeah, it cracked 100,000.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Now you got me
I
looking.
mean, it's back now, down below.
Oh, okay. But it spiked up?
Yeah. As of the time of recording, let's see. It's at...
Yeah, sitting a little below.
99,214. But yeah, it went up to 102,000, roughly.
Uh-huh. That's pretty good.
Bitcoin's making moves, which is awesome.
Some nice growth.
Uh-huh. And then also, so I brought this up last week, that Danny Gallimore, I think is his name, the one who went on Danny Jones. He's the laser DMT guy.
Oh, yeah.
Did you end up watching any of that?
Did not. I really just forgot.
No, it's all good.
And I don't think, I don't know, maybe I did have access to it, but.
Yeah, it's just on the Danny Jones YouTube.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So unless you're shadow banned from YouTube, I think you got access. But he had this, he had his whole show on there, and I listened to the rest of it. I think when we talked about this last week, I had just kind of started cracked into it. So
we were guessing what he was going to be talking about.
Right.
So what did he end up?
So he ends up, he's very, it's hard to explain because he's not a scientist, right? But he's clearly well-read. He's read a lot of science. He's read a lot of philosophy. And he's pretty well-spoken, but he's not like ultra precise.
An expert, quote unquote. Sure. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, but so the claims he's making is that this thing, this code, this whatever you see when you look into these lasers, and he says it's not just code, but that's like kind of the best explanation, is that it's the number one claim is that it's real. Like it persists. Like he's gotten over 100 people to take DMT and try this.
Wow.
And he says they've all reported something similar. And he said for a number of them, he didn't even like brief them with like what to expect or anything.
Just say, hey, do this.
Yeah.
This.
And, like tell me what you see type stuff.
Yeah. So he's trying to do the best science he can.
Well, he's trying. Yeah.
So he got 100 people. He's trying to get a pool of people and get a baseline.
Yeah. He's working on a documentary about the whole phenomenon.
Oh, really? Okay.
So his number one claim is that whatever it is, it's real. And then I forget what he says is like the other one.
It's fundamental. Like, is that what he's saying?
Well, he's just saying that whatever this effect is, it's a real effect that is not just in his mind.
I see. So he's trying to reassure people he's not insane. Or at least he's not the only one seeing this.
He's making the claim that if you do DMT and you go look into a laser, you will see something comparable.
Okay.
Basically.
Okay.
But he's also did a lot of speculation on top of that, right? So a lot of like trying to like theorize on like what it is, and that's where he talks about like thinking that it's like the code of the universe.
The code of the simulation.
Right. And he says he was like in communication with like the DMT entities and like asking them like, is it okay if I like talk about this? Because I kind of want to talk about this to everyone.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I mean,
Who you want?
yeah, just, I mean, it's not.
Nobody's going to believe you, but.
I think they were like, yeah, I mean, it's your discovery. We're not going to stop you. He's like, we're not going to tell you stuff where you're not supposed to know, but go ahead. Anyway, so he started reaching out to a bunch of scientists who are in that space, like in the like DMT research space, and trying to get some attention from them and get this idea brought to their attention. And so then a few days ago or earlier this week, a video popped up on YouTube with Andrew Gallimore, who is a DMT researcher, PhD researcher, super smart guy. He's one of these people that's doing all this like pioneering DMT research. He's like trying to figure it out, all these aspects of it out and map the space and figure out like what are all the implications, what does everything mean. And so Danny Gallimore had been, or that's who I'm mixing their names. It's Danny Goler.
Oh, they have similar names.
Goler.
Oh, Andrew Gallimore.
Andrew Gallimore, and
neuroscientist.
Right, Danny Goler. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Danny, I lost my point, but anyway, so Andrew drops his.
Yeah, so they got connected. The two of them got connected, is what you're trying to say?
Yeah, so they actually had met in the past and they had talked about this, and he had told Danny Jones that he didn't really get much response back from
him,
from Andrew Gallimore.
Right.
And so Andrew puts out this video this week, and he gives a full hour and a half like response and breakdown and critique of Danny's observation. Yeah, and hypothesis. And I think he does a pretty good job of like riding the line of being like constructive criticism and addressing his points like in a respectful way, but also like kind of checking him on where he was like going a little too far with his assumptions and whatnot.
Which is constructive and good for people to get.
And he seems to be expressing this like one thing that he's kind of expressing is that he's a little bummed that Danny has gone this route of like blowing this idea out to the internet, because he feels like he kind of poisoned the well on the research side of things.
Yeah. My initial thought with when we were talking about the other guy and what he's been and how he's been on Danny Jones now, and you like and even just the thinking about like him getting the permission to like talk about it, right, from the DMT entities or whatever. Like it seems like you're putting the cart before the horse, right? Is that how it is? Like you're putting too much stock into this thing when really the stock needs to be put in generalizing and opening the space for DMT use and psychedelic use so that the general population can get on board with that, and don't put this kind of stuff on blast, because this is stuff that you do research on, and you put it out in the spaces where people are already receptive to it.
Yeah,
but Danny Jones is a little bit more like he's just kind of putting too much attention on DMT when people are still trying to get like real openness about it, right? Like that's what the vibe I'm getting.
I think Andrew Gallimore is fine with people having focus on DMT.
No, I know, but in certain ways.
He just thinks that this particular observation, if you blow it up to the world like that, then it's kind of hard to do an objective study. Because the sort of DMT community, people who are willing to even take it, is a smaller community than the general population, obviously, right? And people who are willing to do stuff like that are more likely to be like plugged into these like channels
already,
and so they're likely to hear these ideas.
Right.
And so if someone comes into a scientific study already having the expectation that if you look at a laser on DMT,
you're going to see
happen.
something. Yeah.
So how do you separate the
it's true.
The idea being sort of incepted in your mind from the phenomenon itself?
Yeah, I mean, it is true that he needs support. Obviously, like this guy's not like backed by a university or has like big financial. Like if he wanted to do this the right way, he would need people like Andrew to get on board and be willing to help with that. And that's probably what he's meaning by like you're kind of getting ahead of the game here,
right? But Andrew did say he's like I think this is a important discovery because, or
at least it's worth trying to discover more.
Well, he says like at the very least there is like a really interesting and like provocative research paper in this for someone in the scientific community to do this study. And then from there, maybe break it apart more.
Learn more about it,
yeah. And then Danny went and posted a response to the response, and now there's this whole internet conversation going on. I wouldn't necessarily expect Andrew Gallimore to do another public posting in response to that, but
yeah.
Well,
that's interesting. No, it's cool to see that there's some.
So yeah, if you're into the whole
stuff going on there,
DMT laser alien code phenomenon, there's a whole internet drama laid out before you that you can partake in.
It's the code for the software.
Yeah,
we just don't know where the hardware or what the hardware is.
So I'll leave some links to all that. But yeah,
cool.
So what do we got? You got you got a couple Bashar ones. Should I do the second one you sent first?
Let's do the second one first, and then
Okay, so let's check this out. Our weekly dose of Bashar.
Several years ago, you actually had a different history than what you remember now, but you don't know that. One of the original history choices you made was that your President Kennedy was in fact assassinated in 1968. The reason for this is because near the end of his second term, he was about to reveal the existence of extraterrestrials. The idea is that it actually was revealed, and in that particular parallel history caused so much chaos and so much collapse in your society that he was labeled as the cause of it. And someone assassinated him for that reason. Now, because of the societal collapse in that particular history that went along with the revelation of our existence, you decided to shift as a society and take another path. And to prevent it from happening, you chose a history where he died in 1963. And therefore never had a chance to reveal what he had planned to reveal. Because the original assassination occurred in 1968 based on the idea of the collapse of society, it created a very strong eddy, a very strong current in the fabric of space-time. Even when you shifted your collective consciousness to the idea of a history in which he died in 1963, effects from the original 1968 still existed and still impacted the new history, which is why Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King were assassinated in 1968. Several years...
That's why. All right, that's a brand new take on the JFK assassination that I've never heard.
I thought that was cool. At least, I think he's on to something.
I mean, look, I'm not going to be one of these people who's just like, no, it's impossible. But it sounds pretty out there.
Sure.
But, so that's like it's like an interesting, different take on how sort of time travel and like
time itself is
Mandela effects and whatnot can happen.
And based on a lot of the things he talks about, it's like fully possible and it is happening. It's like, and he, it's the idea of like all history is all happening, or the past, present, and future are all happening at the same time. Is kind of their belief. And like, so the events of your past can be changed, of the collective past can be changed in the sense of it being a new branch or a new, highway on this, I don't know, wheel, I guess, of time, that if everything's happening simultaneously and maybe there's some spiritual control over where you are or where your attention lies. Where you're pulling information from. It's an interesting idea of like, and that being one of them, like all past events have gone both ways.
I mean,
like all events is kind of like going into the multiverse idea.
The main problem I have with this line, like this idea that he's espousing here, is sort of he's saying that we sort of collectively decided it would be better to not go down this route,
or to go back and to change the history, basically.
Right.
But I think what he's saying it like that, but I feel like not meaning, but like it's really more of like there's a different choice. There's always all these different paths, and the consciousness of certain people or whatever, like chose in some fashion to have the history rewound or in some way.
So is it? Yeah. So he's not.
They're latching on to.
He's not specific here. Is he suggesting that there's like a rewinding? Is he suggesting there's like some sort of time commando who went back and in time and killed him? Is he suggesting that like our human oversouls that are like, conscious outside of the physical reality all came together and were like, all right, let's run back this simulation a few steps?
I think he, in a lot of the things that we've seen on him, like and his beliefs on like time and stuff, he's talked about it being like they're all happening at once, and all possible things, and all past, present, future aspects of you, and you've always lived in a sense, like you are just like constantly living, or at least when you're choosing to be living on Earth, like you have the time is just looping in a sense. But I feel like he's just saying like you're like, and he's always about like he's always talking about like your energy and your I can't put the words to it, but anyway, I think it's just more of like you choosing to be more synchronized with a different section of the timeline, and all the timeline all possibilities are happening simultaneously within every timeline.
Yeah, so this is like the many worlds interpretation of quantum physics.
Yeah,
where like everything that can happen does happen. Well, in which case, then why would we ever go back and change anything? Because there's one version of us on this timeline, and there always has been, and there's one version of us on that timeline, and there always has been. So what does it even mean to change? Yeah, I mean, I guess that would be the ultimate question is, are you the individual on each of the timelines, or are you some other spiritual being, like spiritual entity that's able to tap into yourself on whatever timeline at any time? Like when you go to sleep and wake up, are you tapping into a different timeline every time? Well, also, I just think it's because if you're doing some sort of rewind, right, and like causing history to then play out differently, right? Say you have that sort of godly power to do that sort of thing. Like there's another issue with that, which is that you're essentially killing all of the people and all of the creatures who only came about in that timeline based on that series of events.
Right.
I mean, sure, you're causing chaos in the world, but that chaos is going to bring people together who would have otherwise never met. It's going to cause babies to be born whose parents otherwise would have never met. Like, it's going to change some people's lives. Maybe at the humanity as a whole is a negative, but maybe in some people's lives there's positive things that come of that. And who has the right to just overrule that for the entire planet?
Well, yeah, that's kind of like the Avengers, right? Like the Avengers dilemma, with all their time travel stuff, and with the blip and all that kind of stuff. If you're imagining the people physically leaving that, I'm more imagining the idea of life itself being the projected, the projector on the screen, projecting onto the screen, right? You're the camera operator shining the light. I don't know. I'm messing up this analogy, but I'm more imagining your soul being is removed from the physical world. And so you have the ability to tap into all the different timelines, and you can, whatever it is that you're experiencing at that time. And maybe there's the idea of it's continuing on. So whether you're just pulling it out and plugging it back into a different timeline, your consciousness or whatever, and everything else just runs off on NPC mode, where everything's just on safe mode and you just let it run. And you're actually only physically conscious in one,
or
at a time.
If we're talking about simulation theory, maybe
that's what I mean.
It's
it's kind of looping into that.
Well, maybe it's loading a different save file in the video
playing
game
a different game
analogy, running back to a backup.
Yeah. But and that's still
there's implications for a lot of people to make a decision that huge,
right?
And then. I don't know how I feel if what he's saying is true. I don't know how I feel about that ability existing.
Yeah, right.
And if he's saying that we all kind of collectively came together and did that, that's a whole nother thing. How? We never collectively come together and do anything.
Well, what if he just means the collective of the souls?
And is this some sort of technological shift, or is this some sort of power of the mind, which is essentially magic? People aren't awake to this stuff.
Right.
So did we have to go so far in the future that we developed the technology or the spiritual understanding to all come together and realize that a century ago now is this time that ruined everything? But if it was that bad, it led to us having the ability to do that. So it couldn't have been that bad.
At least in the long run, right?
Yeah, there's just a lot of weird
everything's
contradictions and unclarities.
Yeah.
Which,
But if you just assign it the idea of it's your soul, right? It's the souls collectively deciding that they would rather live on a different timeline, and you had physically and mentally you had nothing to do with it. But all of a sudden one day you woke up and the whole world had a Mandela effect.
Yeah, so
the whole world woke up with a Mandela effect, and it was a soul collective, behind the scenes. Nobody even knows what's going on except for maybe some that are conscious during those types of things, or are able to connect to it. They're already spiritual and they've already made those connections themselves, and they're able to be a part of the conversation. Maybe there's a few of those outliers, right? But mostly everybody else was just asleep or living their lives. But our souls got together and we're hey, this is, things have gotten bad. It's been 5 years since he told everybody about aliens and everything's falling apart. Collectively, let's whatever. That's obviously granting them all this great power, our souls all this great power to be able to rewind time or go back or act
it's
as if
not
it
even
never
the
happened,
power
or create
I
a
have
new
the
branch,
issue with. It's the communication and the agreement on such a massive scale.
Yeah.
It's either everyone's agreeing, which is freaking impressive. How the hell did you get everyone to agree on something? Or B is someone has the power over everyone else to make that decision, and I'm not comfortable with that either.
Or a group of whatever, yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. So even if it's the souls, you still are saying that every soul would have to agree.
Right. And how does that happen? Like, we're never all asleep at the same time. So does it happen in the dream world?
I mean, I'm thinking it's just like more of an abstract thing that happens in our subconscious or something that's like completely removed from what's going on in our day-to-day lives, you know?
Right, right. That's interesting. The Mandela, so that brings me to like another alternate theory of like how you could explain this happening, which is like instead of some sort of time travel mechanism, it's some sort of illusionary, like it's rewriting the past that is still the past.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is also
do.
incredibly, like, no, for something like this is incredible to consider if that was a real thing, because it would require like essentially dreaming up an entire timeline for the past 5 years.
Right.
For basically everyone in the world, especially if it caused chaos, then you're talking for like everyone in the world. What about the people who died in the interim from that chaos? Like, how do we explain that? It would be some crazy Mandela. Like,
that's true.
It would have to be
crazy.
like incepting false memories into so many people. Like, that's one of those days.
Or imagine.
Yeah, that's
that
like 9/11 was for us, where like you can ask someone like, "Where do you know where you were? Do you remember?" Like, and you know where you were, and you can remember exactly like what position you were in when you found it out. And that is that type of event for people who lived during that time.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what the government's got in their basement?
Yeah, that's a cool idea, though.
Yeah.
It's fun.
It is fun to play with those ideas, man.
I want to see.
That's why I like Bashar, because I don't always agree with everything he's talking about, but it does get you thinking about stuff in a different way.
Yeah,
which is fun.
There's another thing I want to show you. I'm gonna have to search it during the break, but
let's play this other Bashar clip real quick before we go to break, and then we'll do some else before we on the way back.
All right, cool. So this one here.
All right, I'll say good day to you this day of your time. How are you all?
Is that how he goes into it?
Yeah.
All right. All right, all right. We thank you for the co-creation of this interaction once again.
So pause it. We don't have to go through it because we talked about this open contact thing before.
Oh, okay.
But I wanted you to see his little entrance there.
Yeah.
And the fact, like when he said co-creation, so that's kind of the idea we were just talking about. Is like he believes that and we all know that we don't all see the same things, right?
Right.
But everybody's co-creating the moment and the physical, like, characteristics and what we all are like experiencing is independent. So imagine that same idea, like being able to do something dramatic enough to where everybody sees something a certain way, like being able to like use some sort of subliminal effect, like something so traumatic that it could you're talking about like a 9/11 type event. Or like an alien invasion, like some sort of false flag. Like you could see how some sort of event could like burn into your, brain and you'll never forget where you were. I don't know. It's just an interesting idea.
That was another interesting point out, and at this point I'm conflating together the two sides of the podcast from Danny and from Andrew. But they were talking about both of them, I don't know, this idea that that you never interact with the world. You never see the world. What you see, what you interact with, what the world is that looks like it's out there is actually this model in your head. It's this construction, and it's only when something in the real world, something happens that is not expected by your model, does your brain all of a sudden say, oh, wait, we got something wrong. We better pay attention to this.
Something's different. Yep.
And for efficiency reasons, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's more efficient
Saving energy.
to use your own understanding of the world to create what you're seeing around you based off of what you know and expect.
Yep.
But yeah, as soon as things aren't the way you expect, you need to like be reliant on that actual like sensory data. Anyway, so yeah, co-creation. You and I are here, like across this table, looking at each other and talking, and we're creating this moment by coming together, agreeing to do this. But like, our consciousnesses each are having a model.
Yep. And that's where what if our consciousnesses are not just what we're experiencing physically in like senses, but they're actually connected in a sense of like non-physical, and they are in this space being like, okay, yep, everything's making sense. You're seeing that, I'm seeing that. Okay, everything's really good. Boom, whoa, that's different. And it alerts either one of us or both of us, or like there might be some sort of like connection that we just have no idea about. And so when you're in a space with a bunch of people in that, and this is probably why religions are effective, the way that they're structured, and cults, and get a bunch of people in the room and you hypnotize them in a sense of you do your same things that they're expecting.
You're communicating with their subconscious in a way that affects the way that their brain creates the model.
Right. And then you're able to shape and put things out there as well to so that the crowd is getting a similar message, or at least the message that you're intending.
So if that reminds me, I think it's Rupert Sheldrake is the one with the morphic resonance model. Mm-hmm. That's essentially his view is that the model that that you're experiencing, like when I look out and I see you, 6 feet away from me, it's not that there's something in my head that makes it look like you're 6 feet away from me, is that my brain is literally projecting out into the world. And so that my model of you is actually overlapping with the physical you.
Right.
And your model of me is projecting out and overlapping with the physical me.
Yeah.
And that our bodies or brains or whatever are able to pick up on each other's models, and in that way sort of have some sort of non-verbal communication.
Yep.
He calls it morphic fields, I believe. Yeah.
Interaction.
So in that way, that could be the mechanism for how that sort of co-creation
that
or whatever
system
works.
Might work, yeah.
It's interesting.
There's something to it.
Could be. All right, let's take our first break, and we'll come back and enjoy this. This is Stevie Nader. It's called Leave With It. Welcome back. So yeah, this is what I was trying to think of before. There's this YouTube animation. The channel is called Dawn of Us, the animated series. I'll leave a link. So these guys are making like an animated show, like a narrative show.
Based on the story of the Anunnaki.
Like the Zechariah Sitchin essentially telling of the story of the Anunnaki coming down and creating man. And dude, it's great.
So the first episode's out now. I've been watching, or I've been like keeping up with like their whole like start. I've seen a lot of their clips and stuff.
They got the Anunnaki as these long heads.
Yeah.
They got
they're kind of great too.
They got the like reptilians as like the slave species.
They are the Ajiji from the story.
And apparently it's going to bounce back and forth into like the present too, because it's got like modern, it skips forward to modern day and like they're discovering the planet Nibiru and like this whole first episode is them like discovering gold on planet Earth, coming to Earth and making the Ajiji like mining it.
This is back when obviously when there was like different, like were there humans I guess at the time or were
they discover these like primitive humanoids.
Yeah, they were like a different
and because the Ajiji rebel and then they genetically modify.
They basically take Neanderthals or whatever they were. Denisovans.
Whatever they were, Depends how far back you think it happened.
And
then they create the Adamu.
Yeah.
And that's basically the first episode, so I'm super excited to see where they go for it. They're like they're crowdfunding this, so if you're listening, go check out their channel. I'll leave a link.
First comment says, YouTube putting the little anti-misinformation card on this is the funniest shit.
That's so true.
Dude, damn, that's crazy. Oh my gosh.
Yep.
It's a freaking show, man.
I know.
Chill.
Can't anyone have some fun, man?
Like, it's YouTube, man. I remember when YouTube, you could put whatever the hell you wanted on here, man.
Yeah. Anyway.
Nobody's going to fact check you when you're putting a video on YouTube and you're pretending to be a snake. This is actually not a snake. This is a human pretending to be a snake.
Right. Yeah. Can you imagine like little pop-ups coming up on TV when you watch like Futurama?
Oh,
none of this is real.
Oh,
thank you.
Gosh.
Freaking thank you. Jesus, people.
Leave us alone.
Cool. All right. So you also sent me this video.
Yeah, last episode we were
Chris
trying.
Bledsoe.
Yeah, we were trying to find some videos on Chris Bledsoe, the good ones that we wanted to show, and this is one that popped up for me. So let's watch this. I don't know if we want to play the audio. It's him just kind of. We'll play it anyway.
Yeah, why not? It's like this swirling light. It looks like it's flying in and out of like tree branches or something. Like it's on the other side of some tree branches.
Yeah, he just needs to do this shit at daytime. But you wouldn't get that image, that's for sure.
That's a pretty.
It's cool because it looks like it's just like a star form, like glowing brighter and swirling around.
I gotta move around the tripod here.
This person's like, I'm not gonna lie, but that's swamp gas.
Hey, dude, that's the only thing. He's like, this could imagine it's like somebody at the other end of a dark field, and they're just playing with a lighter or like something. It's just you have no context.
Yeah. Unfortunately, because he doesn't like.
I had orbs right over me, flashing me right now while I'm filming this one.
He doesn't like start the image like on himself, like to give you context of scale, size, or even what direction the camera's pointing.
Yeah.
But it's pretty.
Oh, and then you get that there. That looked like it might have been a bug or something.
pretty cool looking.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is. It definitely doesn't look like a plane.
No, it does not. I mean, if he's in fact recording into the sky here,
Right,
like
that's the
whatever
only
the
thing
heck
you can-
that is, that's pretty crazy.
You just can't even tell if he's looking at the sky. That's,
Right.
Oh, well,
I mean, that could have been another background star that we just saw.
and it's moving. That would mean that it's moving.
Maybe
super
he's
fast.
moving the.
Move around the tripod here.
Yeah, see, he's having to move the camera to keep it on it.
Because it does look like it's going in and out of tree branches, so it's probably moving and he's trying to follow it. That's why it keeps going like to the edge of frame. Whoa. That was crazy.
Yeah.
I had orbs right over me, flashing me right now while I'm filming this one.
Interesting. There was also Lue Elizondo put out a video on his own YouTube channel this week.
Oh, really?
Just kind of giving like taking stock of where we're at and
After his
the
hearings.
progress we've made since like his coming forward, basically.
Yeah, since 2017, really?
And it was pretty interesting. I found it interesting that he brought up the Manchester Airport sightings. Did you see those?
I don't know if I saw those.
There was like this orb that like landed on the runway or something.
Oh, yeah. Okay. What did he say about it?
Well, he just mentioned it and said stuff like this, and he's talking about how like the media is covering these things.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did see pictures of this one. It's just a picture, right?
But the airport has responded debunking it,
Right.
according to.
I've seen a lot
the
of these photo
independent.com.
analyzing it.
Yeah, this. Yeah.
Is it a video?
Uh,
Oh, it is. 2
How do you
seconds.
debunk
Oh,
that?
come on.
I mean, if that's even a real video, then
That looks like CGI, though.
yeah, kind of does.
You see the rotation of the camera
Uh-huh.
as it zooms?
That's
That's
the one
better.
that was in the sky.
Is there one in the sky and one on the ground?
That's from one of the planes.
Whoa. Okay, well, shit.
Huh.
Is that another angle from hella far? The one you just showed?
Pause. Jesus. Stop autoplaying. I hate autoplay.
Hey, I know, me too. Me too. Elon said there were some bugs in his, he's like, oh, you just got to email Elon. He'll check it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that one.
Pretty interesting, though. Anyway, just the fact that Lou brought it up, I found interesting. So, yeah, I don't know if any of it's real or anything, but that's the thing is, like, none of this necessarily needs to rest on, like, one video or one
Unless there's one
particular
really
case.
good one.
Right.
That can be verified.
Well, I mean,
Or
things like the
multiple of the
Phoenix
same
Lights
thing,
and Virginia and the school in Africa and, like, just the work of John Mack and all these UFO researchers, like the totality of the work is what like pretty much convinces me.
Yeah.
But there is something different about like sort of intellectually being convinced and like
Seeing the fucking
seeing it and like yeah.
Like once you see it and you're able to like verify with your eyes, you're like, especially when you have like, if there was just all of a sudden, right? And hopefully it wouldn't be a false flag, but if we were all of a sudden, just like Bashar said, like how open contact would look like is just like ships coming and hovering and staying off the coast and like hovering there and just letting you get acclimated to their presence,
giving time for anyone who wants to go and see them to be able to go and see them, type stuff.
Like literally being there for like years probably and just not doing anything and just floating there,
right?
Just to get people to wrap their heads around the idea that something is out there, right? And not do anything threatening, nothing like that, just to like ease people's minds that it's not like some imminent threat, right? But anyway, my point was like, if that's the case, then like we just that's what we would take to like get people to like really get on board. Like that's the type of event that would
either that
everybody's videotaping it, everybody's seeing it from all over the world. There's no hiding it anymore. There's no saying this is fake or whatever, and then you can go and travel there and see it yourself, right? That's the kind of thing that really would put an end to it.
So that's like the best. Like that would absolutely put an end to it, right? Yeah. There's other things that would put an end to like 90% of it, 80% of it, right? So like the U.S. government ending the secrecy and having disclosure and then just dropping all the video, high quality video that they have, that could end it as well. Especially if they open up to the fact that they've been misinforming and misdirecting the American public about it for so long.
Honestly,
and
I think it's
that
more
they open up the data from their sensors for scientists, like academic, popular scientists, to be able to, the freaking Neil deGrasse Tysons of the world, to see the data for themselves. Like that would probably achieve it for probably 90% of people. There would be the flat earthers who would think it's all fake, but
I hope we're going in that direction, because I see that we're going in a disclosure route, but I also see like chess being played. Well, in a sense of like they've had this information there for long enough periods.
Well,
if there is some sort of open contact that's going to happen, or disclosure, even just a disclosure, like how long are they going to like prolong this or this disclosure? Like they're already prolonging the hell out of it. I mean,
there's clearly, I mean, from everything that you read, there's clearly two factions here. There's the faction of people
who want to keep it
secret to the bitter end, and then there's the faction of people who think it's time for people to know.
It might be more likely or more probable that we'll get ships to just land.
Well, it seems like the tides have been turning, and that there's more people in positions of power in today's day and age who are not the ones who were in power when the secrecy went in place, right? Sure. There's a new generation of people who've come up, and now they're in these positions just as powerful as the ones of the people who are trying to keep it all secret. And you've got these factions tug-of-warring over this topic.
Well, and it's also the fact that we have like elected officials and non-elected officials within the government, and these non-elected people can literally be in the government for life, and nobody's going to kick them out.
Right, but there's different factions even within those non-elected people.
Sure, no, I know, but I mean, the elected people are the ones who are our spokespeople and the ones who are actually going to ask the questions that we are wanting to get asked. And if they're not able to get the answers, like, and I just think that the government, it's probably better for the government that they do disclose it before an open contact event.
Yeah, because it's going to make them look terrible.
It'll make them look so bad, and it'll probably do more harm for society in the short term, but in the long term, a governmental collapse.
I was going to offer a third option, which would convince less people, but it would convince a lot more people than are convinced now, which is just stopping the suppression.
Sure.
Like whatever forces out there in the government that are actively going out into the world and like preventing videos from going public, and
That's a good point.
telling people to be silent, and
That would be effective.
if they were to stop that wing of their operations
And just hold on to whatever
allow
secrets they
people to just naturally
Get to the point.
whatever objects
Yep.
they can pick up from the ground after a UFO is flown by, or whatever videos they get,
Yep.
and the people who have the super crystal clear ones, and people who operate like private telescopes, and like all this private data that they've been probably spending decades trying to keep a handle on and classify
That's a good
and
point.
make secret and swear people to secrecy. Like if they just stop that aspect of their operations, then I think
Let the disclosure come out at
the
the time it
crowdsourcing
will.
of the
Information
information will
get out
build
there.
up to a point
And
where it
they've already
becomes more
got
certain.
They'll have already had the lead on all the technology, so all these private companies will still be able to come out with products
Right.
and say, "Oh, it was from one of the latest things. We got this, and it's already ready." It's like
right.
we're the ones that'll supply you with all the new gen tech from all the whatever. If
So
that's
like
one of
that
the,
sort of approach would take longer, and less people. It would take longer for people to be convinced, but like you could let essentially disclosure happen on its own that way,
but that's also the one
without having
that
to
would
come
have the
out and
most
say, "Hey, we've
manipulation.
been lying to you."
That's the third option. That would be probably where the most manipulation continues to happen with the information and what happened in the past, and like not getting information, which might be better for us to just move on, let those things die off. But some people are going to want retribution for anything that's happened.
Yeah, I'm probably
So-
one of those people. I wouldn't be cool with just
So
leaving.
like leaving all of what we knew about and potentially what we do know about our deep history,
Right.
Like wanting to know
like
what
even
we,
like the JFK assassination.
Yeah,
Like I think all the files need to come out. I know that it's been a long time, and I know that like
Certain people
it's not
might
going to
get hurt
change a
by it,
lot
but-
anymore. And I know that some people have said that the reason that that it still hasn't come out is because there's people still alive. In fact, Trump said that on the Joe
Yep.
Rogan show.
Yep.
He said he wants to disclose it all.
The
He was
people's
but there's
information-
people who are still alive who it would affect, which is an interesting admission. So, anyway, shall we hop into this?
Yeah.
We're coming up on a break, but not super close. So
Let's get into a little bit.
let's get into a little bit. Okay, so we are going to talk about season 2, episode 2. So I know our last episode on this was Drew's talking about. What were you talking about?
We were talking about the Peruvian like pre-Incan sites and like how they had those like, crazy tunnels. We talked about like what kind of technology it might have taken to get the type of work done on those stones, and like the evidence for vitrification on some of them in those crazy tunnels.
So
that led to,
if
like,
you
altars.
recall the episode I covered, which was episode 1, we started with White Sands, New Mexico, and the footprints they found there.
Right.
Um,
yeah, with the lady and the
and-
baby or whatever.
Right, and then they spent a lot of time talking about the Amazon and the geoglyphs, and that's essentially where we're going to pick up here is all those geoglyphs. And if I recall, like just at the end of that, so he had done some like flying in an airplane and photographing the geoglyphs, and then just right towards the end of the episode, they were like launching a drone to do some LiDAR scans, but they kind of, that was their cliffhanger for episode 1. So in episode 2, we get to see a bunch of this LiDAR footage or LiDAR photos, and it reveals a bunch more of these geoglyph formations inside the tree line that you couldn't see previously.
Yeah, because there's a bunch of the
and
photos that
including
you see.
roads.
Yeah, because a bunch of the photos you can see are like open fields with no trees, but yeah, these are underneath the trees.
Yeah. And then this Dr. Marty Parsonen that he was talking to, the archaeologist, anthropologist, he made the statement that civilization here could go back like 10,000 years. And And so I guess I'll start us off here where they talk a little bit about the scale of the civilization.
1,000 years into the past and brings us very close to the end of the last ice age. However old they may be, the scale of the enterprise is truly astonishing.
So this raises the question, how many people would it take to do something like this?
They speak about hundreds of thousands.
Yes, literally hundreds of thousands of inhabitants.
Yeah.
Amazing. Professor Parsonen isn't suggesting all of those people physically built the geoglyphs. But a population that size must have existed here, long term, to both provide for and support the necessary workforce.
So, yeah. That, I think, is such a key point.
Yeah, not just the people working on it. Like, you need, families to support them, and you need
people to make their clothes, you need people to make their tools, you need people to build the roads, you need people to
growing the foods,
who are teaching, you need people who are like fighting off any invasions from the neighboring clans, you need your spiritual leaders. Like, the entire civilization has to be of such a size to allow enough people able to be in a workforce to create this type of thing.
At that scale, yeah.
At this scale, right. Which, if you take back the thinking to like our iPencil episode and like all the different things involved.
That goes into just the most simple things.
Right. So you do that for this, and yeah.
Man, that's such a good point. Yeah, because all the and that's such a good point with like when we talk about like the vases and stuff from like these early times, and like all the intricacies of like the ability to, like, if you like pinpointed on this, like the ability to learn that, like, you don't just wake up and know how to do that to stone.
Right.
The amount of time it would have taken to get to that point, and if they're finding them at this point, it would have taken hundreds, or if not generations, multiple generations of people to get to that point where they can they can do it with this fine detail, this precise scale, and have tens of thousands of them reportedly.
Yeah.
Even though probably only 1,000 or so are out.
And then Graham makes this interesting point after this where he's like, so if this is what we're finding just flying the drones, like, so the way they're finding these right now is they're going to where there are known geoglyphs, right? Which are right on the edge of the Amazon, right? Because these big burns to like clear this farmland that's exposing these geoglyphs, right? So they're going to the areas where they're finding these geoglyphs, and now they're flying these LiDAR drones over the forest that's off neighboring those geoglyphs, and they're finding all these more. And so he poses this question, like, what are we going to find if we do like a comprehensive scan? If we are able to fly into hundreds of miles in and scan all of this, like look at how crazy the scale of this is now. These are on the edges. Right. Like, what is the true scale of this if we actually get like a complete survey?
Yeah.
I mean, just on what they're talking about, like that scientist there, he was estimating the hundreds of thousands based off of what he's seeing in that area, right? Like of what they know about. But there's just so much more that hasn't been scanned, hasn't been surveyed yet. So
yeah, is it the possible millions of people, or tons of at least from that book, the Amazon, the trip down the Amazon or whatever it was called,
River of Darkness, yeah, same thing.
Yeah, like, was it the just flourishing civilization on either side of the Amazon, just for miles and miles and miles?
Would that mean that like that South America like was outpopulating, like had a greater population than Europe even at the time? It very well could have been.
And it was in a zone where it would have been less affected by the ice age.
Right. Well, Yeah, there was a bunch of mammal or megafauna lost in South America too. Like they got hit.
Well, they got hit by a giant asteroid.
But
Well, that was the
the
never mind.
younger Dryas. They got hit by it too. I think the continent that got least hit by it was Africa.
Yeah. That's why they still have the megafauna.
They had the least extinctions.
Yeah.
And they still have the most megafauna left out of everywhere else.
But I'm just saying, like, the population, right? Like, even during the Ice Age, you might have had a greater population of if there were humans way back then.
Right.
You know, if we're going to grant that, like, maybe they had been here for, you know, tens of thousands of years or thousands of years before the end of the Ice Age. And they got rocked by the end of the Ice Age by whatever happened to end the Ice Age. But still were able to, like, you know, grow back into the area after. And that's the peopling. It was never not peopled, or maybe at some point way back when. Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure it's like a hybrid of like reestablishing populations from survivors.
Plus like
the conventional explanation of peopling, which is the sort of out of Africa and across the land bridges. I think both probably. It's most likely that it would be a sort of combination of both that happened.
Especially with the difference in the genetics that he talks about in America before.
Right. And we're actually going to get into some of that. So cool. Let's take our next break. This is TJ McNulty, and the song is called 21 Young.
Words are only words, but I believed yours. For some reason I thought of you as my world, but you're just a person. And this is only heartache if I accept it. Remember, your mind pulls together faster than your heart. Don't forget it. 21 young is all that I am. I'm too young to understand love, but think I can. Maybe someday I'll think about this a different way and be thankful that I got to waste my time with you. Well, I am only me. I'm sorry I don't exceed expectations you had for me. My apologies. But your love was only love for the idea of me. Well, yes, we actually had a click, but you got sick of me. I can say the same things. 21 young is all that we are. We're too dumb to understand love, but think we know our futures. Well, maybe someday I'll think about this a different way and be thankful that I got to waste my time with you. was really us, so something was bound to give. I know I fight issues with my trust, and you just wanna live.
Welcome back.
It's a good song.
Yeah, that is a good song. All right, so let's talk some more about Ancient Apocalypse.
All right.
So at this point, they transition and they move over to the site called Serra do Paituna, I think, something like that. I'm sure I'm butchering it. Said it's called Hill of the Blackwater Lake. It's in northern Brazil, off the Amazon River, and he interviews this doctor, Christopher Davis, who found these rock paintings down there. So let's check that out.
Yeah.
5:30. There we go.
Thank you for leading the way. We're obviously surrounded by just this amazing art here. What led you to this investigation and this exploration?
I started doing archaeology as a graduate student, and I had no idea that there was rock art in the Americas. And so I was blown away by that.
The images are known as pictographs. Some are very simple, maybe a serpent slithering across the rock. Others depict more complex geometric patterns. The big question is, when were these images painted? The art itself can't be dated, so Dr. Davis and his team looked for other evidence.
What's your dating of this site based on at the moment?
It's from the excavation that we did back behind here. There were fragments of carbonated wood, mostly palm wood, some carbonated seeds. We found evidence of a fire back there as well.
The results were truly unexpected.
From the radiocarbon dating, the oldest dates that we got were about 13,200 before present.
Fascinating.
So that's the earliest date of evidence of some sort of habitation of that area?
At this site, that's what they found. Yeah.
Carbonated wood, I've never heard of that.
Like
carbonaceous?
I think it means just like it's been kind of burned, maybe. So yeah, that's those pictographs are pretty cool.
Yeah.
You see the one that kind of looked like a calendar? It looked like a like a grid with like X's.
Yeah. I did see that. It almost looked like some sort of like structural thing too. Like it could have been like some sort of like building code showing like they're a building of some sort too.
Yeah, I did some searching on Dr. Christopher Davis, and he does have like a scientific article talking about a calendar here.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that he believes it's a solar calendar where people in the past have assumed it was a lunar one. And that's like the argument he makes in his paper.
Okay.
But pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, I mean
that pushes it quite far back.
Yeah, it's just how sophisticated were they other than the paintings, right? Like, obviously we know there were people back then, but
13,000 years ago, though, that's right at that younger Dryas mark.
Yeah, and if they're making calendars, and I mean, their understanding was probably at least very high of like something, maybe that's back when we were a little bit more spiritual and maybe had a little bit more command over nature.
That's real interesting. Back in like how Secret History talks about.
Yeah, like back when, before just like materialism
had taken hold.
When you were just one with nature and nature was one with you, and you had the ability to live with as one with it and get all your needs from it, and you had no wants outside of what you just needed to survive.
There was another,
but you can still have an understanding of the heavens, and you can still grow, and you maybe they lived for like their society or that epoch of human existence lasted hundreds of thousands of years, and that was like the idea of the Secret History, right?
The other big thing I took in this week was I watched 2 different interviews with Dean Radin. Have you seen Dean Radin before?
No. Is that Ken?
Dude, I thought the same thing. He's our dad's friend. Our
dad's buddy.
Real similar look.
Yeah.
So
that's Ken.
There's this interview here on the Demystify Sci podcast, and I'll leave a link to both of these. And these two seem to be pretty scientifically minded, just based off of their like vocabulary and like the way they speak and communicate, and like the types of terms they're throwing back and forth with Dean.
Okay.
But this other one with Amrit Sandhu, and he seems to be more on the like magic, new agey kind of like side of things. And he has a whole different like side of a conversation with Dean.
Okay.
So Dean Radin is a PhD engineer physicist who has been studying parapsychology for 40 years. And he is, you probably remember him from, any of you who have seen him before would definitely, or have seen this before, the What the Bleep Do We Know, the old documentary.
Was he in that?
He was in that.
Oh, really?
And
if I heard his voice, because I've seen that look, obviously, like it looks like, but if I heard his voice, I feel like I'm hearing his voice now that I'm looking at him.
Yeah.
And now that you've said that, I'm like remembering.
So I kind of want to do a whole podcast or even a series on his work because it's freaking incredible. But essentially, he's saying that like psychological, like psych effects. They call it psych, which is
parapsychology.
Like all these sorts of like psych effects, like psychicism. I can't talk.
You got yourself tongue-tied.
Tongue-tied.
Oh boy, here we go. We're falling apart here. Psychic effects.
Yeah. What's the other term? Sort of like
telekinetic.
No, like
telepathic?
More like seeing into the future, like almost like prophetic stuff. But like there was a different term he used that sounded way more legit. I'm searching for it and I can't find it. And then there was like 3 families of things. So one was like the psychic stuff. One was the like seeing into the future stuff. And the third was like I think he called it like theogony or something, which is like an interesting term. But he said it's essentially this like idea of interacting with intelligences that are either humans who are past or intelligences that never even were or have been human.
So it's kind of like
shamanism and
it's
visions,
like speaking to the dead,
like ayahuasca and like the types of things that like these secret societies and whatnot are.
It's like having a connection to some spirit realm with entities who have either lived before and are now passed on, or they haven't lived here yet, but they're still there, available.
Right.
You know, kind of an idea.
Like the Bashar stuff would be
channeling,
an example of it. Channeling,
exactly.
mediumship, shamanism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
talking
the
to
third?
DMT elves. Those are like the three families of effects.
For the psychometry, what do you called it?
Yeah. The psi effects.
Psi effects, that's right.
So he was able to devise some tests, and so he's like really famous for doing these random number generator, research, and he has been able to show like, and these are not just like pseudo random number generators. These are random number generators that are using like cutting edge physics, and they're not using some like computer algorithm to fake random numbers. They're like using radioactive isotope decays, or like things that are like completely, utterly unpredictable.
Okay.
That are as good as like as close to as provably random as possible, and making random number generators out of those effects, and then he'll bring people in and get them to influence that random number generator, and he's got just countless like just gobs of data showing that you can influence a random number generator that's like a 50-50 random number generator. So let's say on the top it's like, if it's a 1, on the bottom it's like a 0. So like it'll be like 50-50 in the middle, and then as soon as you get someone like trying to influence it, like it will go off of that 50-50 line
to whichever direction they're influencing it.
Right.
Interesting.
And he's just got so many cool experiments that he talks about through all these. And he's got this really cool book called Real Magic. And anyway, the reason I brought this up now, because A, I want to do a whole podcast on it, but B, like as you were talking about back in this day, like way back in history, like before we had this like materialist worldview
that blocked our senses.
Right. That if we have these sort of like, if this sort of like magical effect actually exists in humans, and if humans actually believe it exists, that's the key.
Practiced it.
But you have to believe, like that's the big key. Like if people understand that it exists, they believe that it exists, and they have practices based on it, it's a whole different world that you would be experiencing.
Absolutely. That's why that picture that we had generated like early on in the podcast for Secret History of the World is so like perfect for that book. Like it's, that whole story of the man walking through the woods and how he might experience the world completely different back with the knowledge that he had.
Screenshot that one for me so I can
I'll send you the file.
Include it.
But yeah, this one's so like perfect. It shows like the trees as being, the trees and the lightning and the, there's like wisps of smoke in air. Like everything was alive to them and everything spoke to them because they had a completely different understanding of the world.
Right.
And their part in it.
Right.
How the world worked through it. The wind meant something, the crack of lightning overhead was a message.
Right. Anyway, looking forward to doing a whole series on his stuff. But yeah, let's keep going here. So this next part, he goes into, he kind of talks about other sites down in the greater Amazon that also have these rock paintings, and he's kind of comparing them.
Oh, because the other ones that he was looking at were in America, weren't? Right?
No, the first one that we just showed, it was in like northern Brazil.
That's right.
But this, we're talking like now we're sampling across different areas in this section he's about to go through.
Okay.
More Paleolithic art has been found in the western Amazon, like this intricate mural in the jungles of Colombia, where 12,600-year-old images depict humans alongside what appear to be creatures of the Ice Age. We are seeing an eyewitness account of the coexistence of human beings with now long-extinct Ice Age megafauna. And to the east of the Amazon, these paintings push the dates back further, to more than 25,000 years ago. which means 2,000 years before those hunter-gatherers were walking the white sands of New Mexico, there were other people already living in the forests of South America, creating art like this, and in great numbers. This should open up exploration of what those human beings might have been doing in the Americas over these tens of thousands of years that archaeologists previously didn't think there were any human beings there at all.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, so
Yeah, what if the northern, like the people who had moved up or populating like in New Mexico or whatever were like the hunter gatherers, whereas the people down south were the people who had gone, who are more civilized and are building cities now and
right,
you know, fully integrating their societies into
right,
you know,
right. But he's also making the point, like this, that one of those ones that pushed it back another, you know, back 20-something thousand years.
Right.
Like now you're thousands of years before even the dating of those footprints in New Mexico. And so you already have people down there in numbers. Like that's, and yeah, that's,
and well, the paintings connect people of some sophistication to living when there was megafaunal.
right. When
So
there was
before the end of the Ice Age.
megafauna, right. Which is that's
That's pretty
crazy stuff.
indicative of
Yeah. All right, cool. Let's go on to this next bit. So this is where did I put my note? We'll go to 1143 here.
There are countless myths and legends about an ancient cataclysm that are still told all across the Amazon. And there's one that I find particularly intriguing.
According to the indigenous Tirio people, long ago, the sky spirits told a shaman that a terrible flood would soon be unleashed, a punishment for the people's wickedness. Some heeded his warning and fled to safety atop Mount Kantani. But most perished in the deluge. Eventually, the flood receded, leaving the survivors to start over.
So we have yet another flood myth from yet another culture,
within
yet
the
another
Amazon.
area of the world, another time. Like, how many of these do we need?
Yeah. And it's like what we were saying before, like the idea that they were surviving and thriving during the Ice Age, and when this calamity happened, you know, the deluge, as Graham says, he always says that, and every time he's doing a description of it, deluge, the deluge that was unleashed, you know, they were able to restart, you know, and they had to rebuild, and then by the time the the Spanish got there, unleashed their diseases and killed off everything in 100 years, how long was it till they came back? Or I guess it was when they actually came to
the
conquer.
Europeans came. Yeah. So
it's crazy that all of that could happen in that time. Like I don't know. How long was that? I can't remember. Do you remember how long it was between when de Orrelana saw what he saw and when the Spanish came back?
So when Francisco de Orellana...
Well, I guess the Spanish did come and conquer, so it would have been the
Yeah. So Cortez came and he like conquered Mexico. He conquered like the Aztecs, and then some of his family...
and they burned everything and
like
just destroyed all of their
crossed
stuff.
over the little thin part of Central America and like built new ships and like came down the west coast, and then they started conquering Peru, the section of like the Inca that was
That's
there.
right. That's where he started their trip because that's where they had already landed, huh?
Right. So by the time Francisco de Orellana comes into the picture, they had already conquered western Peru, the part that's on the west side of the Andes. The part that was on the east side of the Andes is just Amazon jungle all the way to the ocean, right? So anyone who had gone in there had only taken like minor little explorations, or more people had tried like from the east side to like go up the river, but like no one had ever penetrated very far into it. Where Francisco de Orellana, he was the first one to
go down.
He hiked over the Andes Mountains from western Peru, over the Andes. They got to the headwaters of the river, built a boat, and then took it all the way until it dumped into the Atlantic Ocean.
And then how long was it from the end of his excursion to
From
when they
his
actually
trip,
got down the Amazon again?
Yeah, from his trip to the next, it was. I mean, it was a while. It was quite a while because people didn't really believe him.
Right, they didn't believe him. Plus, it was a harsh environment. Like people weren't just like lining up to go out into the middle of the Amazon with no gear, They stayed near civilization and slowly worked their way in.
Right.
And so by the time, would it have been? Who would have given the diseases to end?
It would have been Orellana
and his crew
because
he did have a big group.
Yeah, he had,
and a lot of them left and like
their expedition was like 300 or so people at the beginning, and then it broke into parts, and then Francisco Orellana's part got on the big boat that they the boat they constructed.
And the rest kind of stayed,
and then the rest kind of stayed. You're right. So
and then they kind of
I think his crew, once they broke off, was smaller, maybe like a couple dozen, 2 or 3 dozen.
It is possible that the crew that stayed likely didn't have enough supplies to go back all the way to where they came from.
So they were basically starving.
That's what they were the ones that they left there, right?
Right.
They were like, you guys aren't going to make it.
They ended up continuing down the river. They ended up finding a place. They continued down one branch of a river and then up a branch, and they found
the other people, right?
Like manioc fields or whatever. I think it's called manioc, and they ate it, and they got real sick, and a bunch of them like died.
Yep, that's right. I remember now.
And they were just suffering, and then eventually they like hobbled their way back over the Andes.
No way.
Yeah. But
forgot that part.
A big chunk of them died, and then he was pissed at Francisco Orellana. They did end up meeting again, and he blamed Orellana for abandoning them. Wow. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he did abandon them, so.
Right, but from Orellana's perspective, like the river was so strong, they had no idea like to expect how gigantic and fast these waters were going to get. Yeah. And the idea was to go downriver, find food, and then come back upriver and meet in a week. And
that's right.
They just got swept down. And it was just no way that they could get back up. Like this wasn't like
a calm part of the river.
They didn't have engines.
Right.
You know?
Well, and it probably was not a calm part of the water. They were going over a ton of like, sketchy spots.
Right. So they at some point they just were like, well,
what are we gonna do?
They had to make the decision, and they talked about it, and there was like deliberation over whether they were gonna go back or whether they were gonna keep going. And they decided to just keep going.
Yeah, so it must have been hundreds of years then, probably.
I don't know if it was hundreds, maybe like 40, 50 years before someone maybe came back, but maybe 20 even. I don't know the date of the next time someone like tried to penetrate deep into the Amazon. But whenever the next date was that someone did go, they didn't find the vast civilization that Orellana reported. But I don't think it would take more than 40, 50 years
if it was like a pandemic, like it just swept through the region.
Right, a pandemic. Like you're talking like all the worst diseases
that you have no cure for. You've never experienced,
and like smallpox, like
Right.
or whatever, like all these diseases that have like
And that would rapidly spread.
ravaged Europe over the centuries, right?
Yeah.
They're bringing all that stuff with them. Now they have to fight with all of those diseases that they don't have immunity to.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah.
They have multiple pandemics happening at the same time, and some of them they're probably, whatever ones survive are probably surviving by isolating themselves. And then, I mean, like we talked about before, if you're going to have a civilization inside of a freaking rainforest, like what's your main resource going to be that you're going to build everything out of is going to be wood.
Mm-hmm.
But like the rainforest will reclaim a city made of wood.
It's true.
In no time flat.
That's true.
You ever gone to like?
I mean, you got to constantly clear. When you live in the woods, you got to constantly be clearing your land because it's all constantly trying to take it back.
Yeah, I mean, we have like you ever like go into? You ever have like a friend who's got like a place out in the middle of the cuts, and like if they don't tend like their roads and stuff, like
Just destroy.
It'll all get overgrown. Like everything will just
start to crumble.
Right.
Yeah, it's true. I guess, yeah, even like 30, 40 years. I mean, if everybody dies like within the first 10, and then you have, 20 something years for everything to just regrow and cover. So if anybody's going down the river, they're just seeing trees and a bunch of brush covering whatever might have been.
Right.
So it's there. It's just nobody saw it. And then after that guy, with nothing, they didn't see anything. Who's the next guy? And that was probably the longest jump,
right,
between the next person who came and started checking.
Yeah, well, once someone went down there and didn't see what he saw, then
like nothing.
Then word went back that like, oh, his report was wrong, and so people started not believing it, and then it became this like legend that was like supposedly a big lie. But anyway, let's take our next break here. We're a little overdue. And we'll be right back. All right.
We'll get back into it.
We just did that one. All right, we're at this one. So now we're going to go back to Serra do Paituna. And
Nailed
it. Yeah. It's like tuna pie, but the other way around.
Paituna.
Which sounds disgusting. I don't want tuna pie. Well, I guess if it's like a chicken pot pie, it could be good. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, some different toppings.
Like a nice white gravy.
Imagine doing like sushi style. You put some fish up in there, or some tuna, and then you do like sushi style, like, and then what would the bread would
just like a golden flaky crust.
Yeah.
All right. Now I'm hungry.
I know, me too.
So this one is really cool. He talks about a particular pictograph here that shows a comet.
UFO. No, damn.
So let's check this out.
We have several images of comets, but one panel particularly, there's a comet that is positioned facing upward.
Right.
The tail is going down, the head is going up.
It looks like a Tesla tower.
Above the comet image is a painting of the sun.
And this was baffling when I first saw it because normally you wouldn't see a comet until after the sun sets.
Most comets are easily distinguishable by their tails, usually only visible above the setting sun, streaming away from it. Surely it would be impossible to see a comet below the sun, in broad daylight.
So that gave me the idea, when would you possibly see a comet head up before the sun sets? Maybe during an eclipse. And so I started looking in astronomy software, and there was an eclipse that occurred facing that image about 13,027 years ago.
Right.
And a comet that was near the sun. If there was an eclipse that darkened the sun, you could possibly see suddenly this comet, and it would be head up facing the sun. So
And that's what we see in the art.
the art does seem to show that.
He said 27,000 years ago?
No, he said 32.
32,000?
Something like 32,000 years ago.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's just telling you, man. I think we go way further back, man. There's more and more evidence of it.
But that's a really...
The only thing is I don't get how they're... Like, do they have an alphabet or like some sort of like archive of like how do they know that that's a comet and that's the sun?
That's a great question that he would have to answer.
I know. That's
I don't know.
That's the only thing. Because like while he was showing, it's like it looks like a Tesla tower looking at a sniper scope.
I mean, it looks. I could see how so this could be like the dot of the comet, right, and then
the aura around it,
the aura around it of the glow
kind of fades out to the back,
and then the tail.
Yeah, I could see that too, but like that could also be like they discovered the wheel.
Right, it's a windmill.
Yeah,
right.
It's some sort of mill, and then
clearly they had power lines.
Right. I'm curious as how they came to that conclusion, but
no, that's interesting. But the idea of a comet below the sun, I found that to be quite interesting. Yeah.
I mean, why couldn't there be theoretically?
So the reason would be because if the comet is below the sun, then that means the sun is up.
I see what you're saying.
If the sun is up, the sky is bright, and you probably can't see the comet. It's
not being able to see it. I see. Okay.
Right.
That makes sense.
Either that or it's headed right for you.
Right. It's so close that it doesn't matter where the sun is.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is another possibility he didn't cover here.
True.
But
yeah, he didn't even think to put that together.
But I find it interesting that he found a matching solar eclipse and comet.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the cross
he said was facing this.
I'm just curious if the cross over the sun is depicting like the sun was crossed out, otherwise saying it was eclipsed.
I think it may be more of like the rays of the sun or something. Maybe
I don't know. It just doesn't seem like enough. It's just like a cross over it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting
Like
decision
Xing out the
to
sun.
depict it that way.
You
Yeah.
X out the sun, otherwise eclipse.
Oh, interesting.
That's what my thought
Right.
was.
So maybe that's showing the the corona that you can see coming out of the eclipse.
Or it's just them saying that the sun was X'd out and what they saw when
Right.
the sun
Right.
was not
the sun,
shining.
It's crossed out, and dude, whoa. I don't know that like the convention of crossing something out. Like it seems like it's obvious and universal, but
Seems
like
obvious. You cross
but
your arms.
You have to keep in mind
flexing
like
it.
cultural differences
Sure.
are huge.
But I feel like not my specifically, but like there's a lot of crossover.
Like there's some places you can go and like give a thumbs up and they're like pissed at you, right? Like
right. No, I get you.
not all symbols translate the same everywhere.
No, I get you.
But that I like that idea. That's
That's the first thing that came to my mind.
yeah, cool.
Especially because they're saying it represents an eclipse, or that there is a matching thing that would make sense for a comet to be below it, and they're making all these connections. I mean, it just made it that was just one more connection you can make. Really,
Right. So then the obvious question to follow up with this, if you're talking to Christopher Davis, is what about the younger Dryas?
The timing certainly fits with when humans abandoned this rocky outcrop.
I know archaeologists don't like to speculate, and I'm going to ask you to speculate, but do you think the younger Dryas had anything to do with that sudden cessation of activity?
You can't ignore it, certainly, because it does come right at that period of time.
Boom.
If he said 32,000, that's well,
No, 32,000 for that alignment, but
but for the exiting of that area, I see.
yeah. So he's saying that at about the time of the younger Dryas is
Yeah.
when the people in this area just like the activity
We're
stopped.
gone,
Yeah.
I see. Yeah, it's definitely suspicious.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I told you we were going to be talking
Yeah.
about the DNA link.
I didn't. Maybe I fell asleep during this part. I don't remember that. I'm talking about it.
Oh, yeah. So let's check this part out.
In 2015, scientists investigating just that question dropped a bombshell. They found that members of certain indigenous Amazonian tribes share a specific DNA marker with people from the other side of the Pacific Ocean.
The fact that we find it amongst remote tribes in the Amazon rainforest and in Papua New Guinea, Taiwan, and Australia suggests very strongly that there was a direct crossing across the Pacific Ocean.
Even more surprising is where this DNA signal isn't.
This DNA signal is not found anywhere in North America. If the Americas were peopled entirely by land, we should find this DNA signal present in North America as well as in South America.
What's more, the DNA signal is very old, dating back at least 10,000 years.
So,
Dating back at least 10,000 years. So before
at
then,
least, right.
Yeah.
So we now have DNA evidence that the indigenous South American people shared a DNA link with people in Australia, Papua New Guinea,
the southeastern
right.
parts of Asia.
right, but not the North American natives.
Right.
And that is
And-
interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it suggests
That some people came to South America overseas.
yeah.
That's what the suggestion seems to be.
Or there was another land bridge, as in Antarctica.
Oh, interesting.
There may have been a southern land bridge connecting South America to southern parts of the Asian and Australian continents.
Right. So him talking about this DNA link and the idea that people came overseas, that leads us now into the Pacific Ocean. And that's where we transition and start going over Rapa Nui or Easter Island. Yeah. And so I'm going to play this section.
Across the Pacific, several islands are home to collections of remarkable megalithic structures. However, the greatest concentration of such monuments is found here. The islanders call them moai. There are more than 1,000 of them. On a remote rock that's smaller than Washington, D.C.
Wow.
Many stand together along the coastline, facing inland, while others are found seemingly at random, as if a massive project had been abandoned midway through.
Freaking music. So unnecessary. Jeez. Can we do some like chill, like give me some
they're
some lo-fi hip-hop background music or something. Jesus, man.
They're trying to get you to feel something.
I'm feeling annoyed. That's so loud. Anyway, yeah. So then he kind of goes over a little bit like the history of the island. And these moai are freaking crazy, man. Like, they're so big.
I think it's interesting that they're facing inland, too.
Right. He talks about how when the island was discovered by the non-natives, like by the outside world, it was raided for slaves and a bunch of people were taken away from the island. Eventually, a bunch of them were allowed to go back, but when they went back, they brought with them a bunch of disease that then rocked the island. And apparently they came down to like less than a couple hundred inhabitants at some point. And because of that, they lost a lot of their knowledge, traditions.
Their stories, yeah.
Right. And so
not much is known.
Right. There's a lot of mystery covering this island, even though there are still the natives there. Because the natives were hit so hard, they sort of lost their ability. They're complete. They didn't lose it all, but they at least lost enough that they don't have the full picture anymore.
Right. They might have some faint remembrances of a story they were told, but
right. And so he talks to like one of the native, I forget the term, but like he's one of the native like historians who like the like knowledge preservers who like pass down their stories through like their family lineage. Yeah. And he talks about the moai, and he talks about how essentially the moai are the actual spirits of their ancestors, and that they erect one to commemorate someone who passed, and it's not until they put in eyes and pupils and like do the whole like funerary that it becomes that person, and that's why they're out there looking in, is because they're like guarding.
Interesting.
Or looking over their descendants.
The land, yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
But Graham keeps going and looking into it further, and talks about how like the dating of the people there. So the conventional dating by like looking at the earliest settlements that you find archaeologically and like dating, doing the carbon dating, the whole shebang, puts it back to like somewhere between like 800 and 1100 years ago, which is not that old.
Right.
But it existed sort of like at the tail end of the Polynesian expansion, when the Polynesians kind of
moving through the
took
Pacific.
off across the entire Pacific, right? And that was like a couple 1,000-year period.
Right.
And Rapa Nui would have been at the very end of it based on that dating.
Okay.
But
still the technology to build those.
Right. They have this really interesting origin myth among the Rapa Nui, and he tells that. So let's check that out. That's here.
The oral traditions speak of a primeval homeland called Hiva, a large island destroyed by a global flood that forced their ancestors to flee.
In this account, the great king of Hiva, Hotumatua, was warned that his island nation would suffer a terrible deluge and be submerged forever. Guided by a vision, he sent 7 chosen men out in seafaring canoes, heading towards the rising sun in search of a new home. After weeks at sea, they landed safely on the island of Rapa Nui, where they were later joined by Hotumatua and hundreds of his people to re-establish their civilization.
So we have a tradition of a great flood and an exploration, and we have to ask ourselves, did such an event happen? You really have to go back to the end of the last ice age to get the kind of flood that would submerge an entire land.
The name of that sunken island, Hiva, in Rapa Nui language means far off land, suggesting it wasn't a land the Polynesians were familiar with. But the arrival of a band of 7 by sea after a time of great cataclysm is a tradition encountered all over the ancient world, from the Apkallu of Mesopotamia to Egypt's 7 sages and India's 7 rishis.
Such traditions often speak of a small band of flood survivors arriving in a distant land in a time of chaos with a mission to restart civilization. Coincidence? Or could these origin stories be memories of real events experienced by many ancient cultures around the world?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's just pile on to those flood myths.
Okay.
We got another notch on our
For Rapa Nui.
belt there. And it's pretty
damning. I mean, a lot of these, like, just the idea of, like, you don't have to believe everything about, like, a lost ancient civilization to understand that there's something where all of these civilizations all over the world have the same types of stories where they were rocked by a flood, and then people came from within the flooded areas of some sort of distant land that they vaguely knew of, that they were not a part of. They were the hunter-gatherers on the edge of whatever place this was, or multiple places for all we know, that those places, and by the accounts of the stories, and at least some of the myths passed down, is like they got too big for their britches, right? They were for whatever reason they were smited down. Like this was like to get them, like the idea of the Anunnaki.
Some of the tellings are
of that
nature.
That nature of them, like being punished for, wrongdoings or whatever. Anyway, like, and then certain people survived and were able to pass on knowledge to the hunter gatherers that they would go and survive with.
Mm-hmm.
It's a crazy coincidence for all of these places to have the same story.
So then the dating of these moai is done because you can't date the giant Moai stones themselves, but the ones that are up on the coast facing in, they're up on these platforms, right? And these platforms are these like rocks stacked together. And so what they could do is find carbon materials within those stones and date that. And so they were able to do that, but then that kind of keeps it in line with the dating they got from like dating the earliest encampments. So that kind of keeps it in that 800 to 1100 year old time period. But Graham starts to question here in this next clip that I'm going to show is what if the Rapa Nui people who are there today did come there in that sort of time period that is expected, but they came there and they found these Moai statues.
Right.
And so that's what he's going to talk about here.
Many of the platforms are really quite rough and ready by comparison with the statues. And we have to ask ourselves the question, are the platforms actually the same age as the statues that stand on top of them? Or is it possible that the statues were re-erected by latecomers to Easter Island, giving us a totally false idea of how old the statues are based on the platforms alone?
After all, throughout history, many objects of great cultural value have later been moved and displayed in a newer setting. In Venice, the 4 tetrarchs of St. Mark's Basilica were actually carved in Constantinople 900 years before they were installed here. And the Renaissance fountain in front of Rome's Pantheon isn't nearly as old as the ancient Egyptian obelisk it supports.
Many of these huge statues were moved around, relocated, placed in different positions. And I think we have to remain open to the possibility that the statues may already have been there when the first Polynesians arrived.
So
Yeah, that's a great point.
It's an interesting point. And also a point I think he's got to be careful because he's going to get some people like the Flint Dibbles coming out and, Graham, you're a racist. You're denying their own history to them, and blah blah blah. And, but yeah.
But if it's true that they have a hard time, they don't know their full history.
It leaves the possibility open.
It leaves the possibility open, and it sort of explains why some of them are erected specifically, or some of them were like erected in certain patterns, and some are just left strewn about randomly. So it's definitely possible that they were all randomly placed at one point, and they were found and dug out and moved. It's open.
Right.
Possible.
So to further investigate that argument, he goes up to like the volcano there, and that's where you can find a bunch of these Moai kind of strewn about and like embedded in the ground all haphazardly. These aren't the ones that are all nicely displayed on platforms facing in. So let's check out this section here.
Many only peak above ground level, their squat torsos embedded in deep sediment. This sedimentation could result from landslides, mud flows, or even tsunamis. But although they might lean, most of the statues remain upright, not randomly tumbled over as you'd expect if such an event were the cause. So what really happened here? For centuries, the sediment concealed the evidence. Until 1914, when archaeologists began excavations. As this photograph shows, some Moai are much more than just head and shoulders, and include the whole torso, lodged deep in the hillside. A finding that was only fully revealed to the world in the 1950s by the famous ethnographer Thor Heyerdahl.
Thor Heyerdahl was a remarkable human being. I was lucky to meet him more than once. He was willing to challenge convention. He was convinced that there were some missing pieces in the story of our past. And he tried to show us that deep in prehistory, ancient humans were capable of achievements that we have tended to allocate to much later periods.
Like this mysterious Moai building project.
Archaeologists tell us that the last...
So, yeah.
Yeah,
so
it's crazy that
essentially-
they're so big like that. I mean, that much sedimentation, like the whole island would have had been rocked by tsunami after tsunami and mudslides, and
Or
to have covered them up after, or they were just so much time had gone on.
right, if they're so old that just the natural sedimentation of like the dirt falling down with the rain,
Right.
and you know the erosion from the volcano and that coming down and eventually filling in and smoothing out the landscape is enough to like bury these things that high. So if it's that,
Yeah, and then the ones that were erected were only the head and shoulders. So it's almost as if some of those were broken off or cut off and moved and transported, unless there were some that were constructed that way to only be head and shoulders. But I mean, I'm just taking a guess. I'm assuming a lot of them are probably full bodied, or at least intention.
Right.
They had the intention
Right.
of doing full body ones.
and if you notice, once they like excavated down, like there was a bunch of
Markings,
symbols and
yeah.
markings down on the body
I would
too.
love to know if anybody's cracked that code.
Yeah, well, we'll have to get into that on the next episode.
All right.
Cool. All right, guys.
Thanks y'all for listening. Yeah, if you guys have any other information on the Moai or some more Amazon stuff, I know there's a lot of new LiDAR projects and people going down in there and checking shit out. So yeah, if you guys got any new podcasts for us to listen to, some interesting documentaries, anything like that, shoot them our way. So if you guys are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anything like that, and you want to get some of these images or watch the videos we're playing, and you haven't already, you can go check out our YouTube and Rumble. If you guys want to get everything, you can go to our website as well at dualitycheck.net. It's got all of our links and all of our show notes and everything on there. We update, or we post on Instagram and Facebook to let everybody know when our episodes are out. Usually Tuesday mornings, sometimes Tuesday afternoons for the YouTubes, but
once in a while on Wednesdays. But
yeah.
the podcast has always been out on Tuesday.
Usually,
Podcast
yeah.
part of it.
Yeah, usually.
I don't think I've ever gone to a Wednesday. For my
I don't
part.
think so. Maybe
I've
one
gone
time.
late on Tuesday.
Yeah,
This is as far as I've gone. But
anyway, yeah, like, comment, subscribe on YouTube and Rumble. You can rate us and give us feedback on any of the podcast platforms as well. Give us a thumbs up and a rating on those. See y'all later.
all right, guys. See you next week for episode 52. Yeah. Adios.